Hey Spuddies, Potato McWhiskey here, and today I'm going to be talking through a tier list for unique units in Civilization 6. The first thing we want to keep in mind when we're rating unique units is how early into the game do they come. As with all bonuses and benefits in the game, the earlier something comes into the game, the better it will be, because you can take advantage of it earlier and reap the snowball benefits for a longer period of time. Generally speaking, units that come earlier in the game are going to be rated higher than units that come later in the game. So if you see a late game unit rating really highly, then you know it's strong as hell for one reason or another. Now that said, there are a lot of dimensions of analysis that goes along with this. For example, does a civ that the unique unit belongs to have any bonuses that synergize with that unique unit to make it stronger than its on-paper stats appear? We also have to consider what type of unit it is. Naval units are generally weaker than land units, purely because most maps have more land than water with only a few exceptions, and land tiles are typically more valuable than water tiles. But that's not the only type of unit we have to consider. Cavalry units, by and large, are more useful than anti-cavalry units. So that is going to factor into a unit's rating as well, largely because cavalry have more movement and generally better promotions than other units. We also have to consider if you can upgrade units into a unique unit or if you have to hard build them, as well as what units they upgrade into. So there's a lot of information that we're trying to condense into what essentially is a single paragraph review of each unit. One note as well that I want to make here is that some of the screenshots will say that units don't cost strategic resources, but just ignore that. It's a leftover bit of information from the Civ wiki that I'm pulling the screenshots from that won't apply if you're playing on Gathering Storm, which you should be if you're trying to make use of this tier list because it's built for the latest version of the game, at the very least Gathering Storm. Also, before we start, I just want to thank you guys so much. The response on these guide videos and the tier lists has been amazing, and it's been an incredibly happy time for me, so thank you so much. I do hate to keep asking, but please remember to press subscribe and like the video. And yes, the per victory breakdown of the Wonders tier list is coming, but that takes some time. Speaking of time, this video took a really long ass amount of time to make, which is why there's less streams and gameplay videos in the last week. So I would appreciate if you considered clicking the join button to become a member of the channel so I can justify the time investment in videos like this. With that information out of the way, we're going to start off as usual, going era by era, then alphabetically through every unique unit in the game. One thing I'm going to be doing differently is that I'm going to be giving very simple suggestions as well for the developers and modders out there to maybe fix some of the units that I think are weaker than they should be. Starting off in the ancient era with the Bireme, the Phonecian Bireme is going to come in at C tier. It's not a bad unit at all, it just mostly suffers from naval units not being super useful in a lot of situations. However, if you are investing into early naval units, it will give you some extra value with +5 combat strength and an extra movement point. It can very easily deal with barbarians on the water. The bonuses preventing trade routes from being plundered is basically a meme bonus worth ignoring. The big thing holding this unit back is that on higher difficulties, city-states start with ancient walls, which means its biggest strength previously has been completely nullified. If this unit did full damage to walls as if it was a battering ram, then it would easily jump up to A or B tier, and that would be how I would fix it, being a middle-of-the-road naval unit that isn't very useful outside just being a galley. The Aztec Eagle Warrior is a high variance unit with some downsides. What that means is that sometimes it'll perform like an S tier unit, and sometimes it'll give you little value. For that reason, it sits in S tier. Despite its drawbacks, it's extremely powerful since it's available right from turn 1. It's situationally the best ancient era unique unit in the game if you spawn near city-states or other players that you can use its higher combat strength to conquer and farm builders off. But its high production cost in comparison to a normal warrior can sometimes leaving you a little bit like you feel that production was wasted. If you can get a few builder steals, then this unit is amazing since it makes up for the investment quite easily thanks to the Aztec's other bonuses. The unit also scales really well even if you don't have iron, with oligarchy and a few improved luxuries and a promotion or two. This unit can easily still be relevant well into the late medieval era, falling off right around the start of the Renaissance when cavalry and artillery start taking over the game. The Hoplite is basically just a better spearman that you need to get 2 of to really get any benefit out of. It's not a bad unit by any measure, but it doesn't do anything special that really makes it worth using, except as a bridge to swordsmen or other more powerful units. For that reason, it's gonna go right down to D tier. It's not bad, it's just not great either. I would probably let them start with a free promotion and earn extra experience, which would bump them up to B tier since anti-cavalry units have great promotions, but they are hard to level up because they're squishy to melee and ranged units that are attacking them. They can be nice for farming culture as Gorgo, but that's really all the extra use they'll get aside from being a way to generate extra era score. The Mayan Hulche, on the other hand, is a fantastic early game defensive unit. In fact, outside of the Nubian Pitati archer, this is easily the scariest unit to be going up against in the early game, thanks to its extra base combat strength, extra damage against wounded units, and the Mayan combat bonus for being within 6 tiles of their capital. It is the premier turtle unit, easily holding off units from higher eras with good positioning and promotions, which means you can get a few of these and power hard for science. That's why it's going to sit in A tier for me. Now, technically speaking, the Maryannu Chariot archer, which I have no idea if I'm pronouncing correctly, should be an extremely powerful unit. It has exceptionally high movement, crossbowman-like stats, and is available extremely early into the game. The big problem is that it's extremely expensive, which makes the return on investment hard to justify. That price is a hard pill to swallow. In all honesty, I would rather have 2 archers than a Maryannu Chariot archer, since they cost twice as much as archers. It's a relatively easy choice to make. When you factor in that it comes at an awkward spot in the ancient era tech tree at the wheel, which means it's hard to effectively rush this unit, to use it during its intended power window, players just really have to make too many sacrifices to take advantage of the unit. If I were able to make this unit better, really it just needs to be a bit cheaper to produce and maintain, lower its production cost, maintenance cost, and and combat ability slightly, and it would jump up a tier or 2 easily. I cannot put it any higher than E tier. The Cree Okihtcitaw, which again, I have no idea how to pronounce this unit. It's a really good early game scouting unit. It's much better than the scout in terms of its combat strength, although not really strong enough to deal with barb camps on their own because they lack the bonus anti-cavalry that regular melee units have. With the anti-barbarian combat card, it can kind of slowly clear a barb camp, but if a single unit spawns, you're dead. The nice thing is that it does start with a free promotion, which is really great, as it allows you to get off a lot more scouting than other civilizations, and since you'll want a scout or 2 in most games regardless, having a slightly better option is nice. The major downside is that they cost 30% more production than the normal scouts, and that's an awful lot of production in the early game, and will slow down their initial scouting quite a bit to the point where it's a real downside that you'll have to consider. If the unit cost the same as the scout, it would land safely in C tier as an average unit, but that higher cost is a real mark against them, so I'll put them down in D tier. Also, I just realized that I accidentally placed the Hoplite into D tier, which is not where it's meant to go. It's meant to go into D tier. Sorry, into C tier, and then the Okihtcitaw goes into C tier. Oh my god, I can't say the tiers right. Oh god, cut the footage. Basically, if the Okihtcitaw had a slight combat boost against barbarians, or if it had an extra point of movement, or if its production cost would lower, it would easily jump up a couple of tiers. The Nubian Pitati archer is the creme de la creme of ancient era unique units, immediately skyrocketing all the way to S tier, thanks to its higher defensive combat strength, higher ranged combat strength, faster movement speed built into the unit, and all of that is in spite of the fact that this unit costs slightly more than a regular archer, which is completely offset by the fact that Nubia's bonus towards producing ranged units essentially make them actually cheaper than archers in terms of how much they cost to produce. I mean, realistically, this unit has so much going for it that it's hard to put it anywhere but S tier. The fact that it can move into 2 movement terrain like hills and forests and still shoot would be good enough alone to put it into B tier. Combining all those other bonuses together instantly propels it into S tier with little room for discussion. And if you really want to put the higher production cost in perspective, a normal civ would build an archer in a city with 10 production in 6 turns. Nubians would build the Pitati archer, which costs a lot more, in 5 turns, and they would have overflow production left. This unit could definitely use a small production cost nerf to bring it from being oppressively strong to just strong. Much like the Bireme, the Viking Longship suffers from the fate of being a naval unique unit, but having slightly better bonuses compared to it thanks to Norway's ability to pillage with naval melee units and bonuses to pillaging in general, as well as being able to heal outside their own territory, and they build these units faster than normal civilizations. It is quite rare, however, to get a ton of use out of this unit, but if you can, it provides great value. Despite everything going in its favour bonus-wise, I still can't really justify anything higher than a C tier. It's better than the Bireme for sure, but not by a massive margin, because it has all of the same downsides. Oh me oh my, the Sumerian War Cart is every aggressive player's wet dream of a unique unit. This thing is a legitimate terror in the hands of players and AI alike, and if one of these things pops out of the fog of war and you don't immediately prepare for it, you could find yourself without a city really quick. It is the strongest Ancient Era unit in the game, it's cheaper than the heavy Chariot, with more movement, no maintenance cost, is available to build from turn 1, ignores zone of control, takes no combat penalties against anti-cavalry units, and it gets another movement point if it starts on flat terrain. The sheer list of things that this unit has going for it, without even thinking about the extra bonuses that Sumeria gets from clearing barbarian encampments and fighting with an ally, this unit can't possibly be anything but S tier. The only major mark against it is that it can be a bit of a noob trap. If you invest too heavily into it too early and don't know how to recover or get value from the unit, it can seriously mess your game up. However, Sumeria does have like a built-in catch-up mechanic by being able to just generate science and culture out of rivers. So other than that, it really is just an absolute beast of a unit. That wraps up the Ancient Era, a mixed bag of units from various civilizations of differing power levels. We'll move on to the Classical Era, where some of the more powerful units in the entire game reside. The Macedonian Hetaroi, I have no idea, again, how to pronounce some of these units. Like, I should really have done a bit of like extra research to make sure I could pronounce these things. This unit looks on paper like a great unit. It costs half as many horses to train as a horseman, which means you can field a lot of them. But it is decently more expensive than a normal horseman, but this is offset by generating great general points when they kill units, having an extra promotion, and getting more benefit from great generals. The really killer hidden bonus here is that they count as heavy cavalry and not as light cavalry as the normal horseman would, which means that you can upgrade them into knights and benefit from the heavy cavalry promotions, which are much better than the light cavalry promotions in my opinion. Now throw in the other Macedonian bonuses for domination based plays, and what you have here is a very solid Classical Era unique unit that I'll give a solid A tier. It's not a game breaking unit, but you will always get solid value from building it, provided you get it early enough and have someone to attack before they can get crossbowmen or walls up with an easy follow up with knights. The Macedonian Hypaspist, on the other hand, is really lackluster. It's not entirely bad, but it's just not stand out. It has no real bonuses to write home about. It's more expensive in terms of production, but cheaper in terms of strategic resources. The extra support combat bonuses are nice, but that only works on the defense against units attacking in melee. Its only real bonus is higher combat strength against districts and cheaper strategic cost. For that reason, I can't justify anything higher than a D tier, almost entirely being carried by Macedonia's other war bonuses. I mean, you could probably justify giving it a C tier because it is technically better than a Hoplite, but I'm putting it down here specifically because swordsman replacement units are among the strongest in the game, and so a bad swordsman replacement unit deserves to get a low rating. Speaking of really damn good swordsman replacement units, the Persian Immortal is incredibly unique and incredibly powerful. You might look at this unit's weak stats in comparison to a regular swordsman and think you're paying more production for less benefit. However, what you're getting is a slightly weaker swordsman with all the benefits of an archer with none of its squishy downsides. This unit pairs incredibly well with cavalry because as melee class units, they rip anti-cavalry units asunder. The real power of this unit is being able to concentrate fire, deal damage without taking damage, earn experience continuously without having to heal, and being able to take advantage of the incredibly powerful melee class promotion tree from range. These guys are a total nightmare to deal with before you have crossbowmen, and by the time you have them, they'll likely have enough promotions and a great general or two, so they'll be able to effectively tank crossbowmen regardless. Now you throw in that the Persians get extra movement during surprise wars, and these things will storm over your enemy's borders like locusts descending upon undefended crops. I'll happily place them on A tier based on their bonuses and unique playstyle. The Roman Legion is another swordsman replacement unit that has a very unique bonus that catapults it all the way to F tier. No, I'm just kidding. It goes all the way to S tier. Just because, man, and like this is without even considering any of its other bonuses. It's just all completely based on the fact that the Roman Legion has a build charge and can build Roman forts. Now, the consequences of having a build charge means that this unit can chop features. If you combine Magnus and the Black Market Governor promotion and the Legion, you can have a single Legion chop out another Legion who chops out another Legion and essentially instantly turn your forest into an army of angry Roman men with swords who not only have a higher combat strength but are very, very angry. Now this is slightly offset by the fact that the unit is a bit more expensive, but that's completely blown out of the water by the fact that you can earn so much production from a unit to make more units. It's ridiculously insane. It's almost like the Legion economy. Now the Roman fort itself isn't very useful, and Rome doesn't really have any war bonuses, but using military units to chop out more military units is so unique and powerful that they belong in S tier, despite them being fairly average combat-wise. The Congolese Ngao and Mbeba, and I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, that is going to be a theme for this video. It's a decent swordsman replacement unit. It's a little bit more expensive, but it has a very nice boost to defense against ranged attacks. It costs a little bit less strategic resources, and it can move in forested terrain with ease. It's just an alright unit that could probably do with a combat strength buff or a cost reduction or another ability to really bring it up out of the C tier. It's by no means a bad unit, but it's not game defining for the Congo. Oh man, the Scythian Saka horse archer is just really bad for a number of reasons. First of all, it upgrades into field cannons and not crossbowmen. It's an archer with more movement and less range. Yeah, you get two of them, but that in no way makes up for the fact that the main advantage of range units is their ability to support melee units and concentrate fire with them. Build a pair of them for the era score and consider deleting them, since they're not even worth their maintenance cost. The thing is, I don't even really have suggestions on how to fix them, because even a small buff to them would instantly catapult them into being incredibly overpowered due to their nature and the fact that you get two of them when you only build one of them. The only thing I would consider letting them get buffed by is letting them move after they shoot, which would make them reasonably okay units. Otherwise they're F tier and you're better off just drowning people and horses when you're playing Scythia. The Maori Toa, much like the Roman Legion, has the ability to chop forests. However, unlike Rome, the Maori get some seriously powerful bonuses from keeping forests around. On paper, this unit should be equally as powerful as the Legion, if not more, thanks to its aura reducing the combat strength of nearby units. It's simply that the playstyle required kind of hurts your other bonuses as a civilization. You can use the Toa like a Roman Legion, but the Toa does have less combat strength and an even higher cost compared to the Legion, and for those reasons I'm inclined to bump the Maori Toa down to B tier. Technically speaking, it's the same as the Legion, but if you were to use them the way that you would use the Legion, you would hurt your empire in other ways. If you're going for a fast swordsman conquest, they're equally as good. However, if you plan to transition into a culture victory, then killing another player with them just isn't going to do you any favors. Oh man, the Varu is insane. Despite the fact that you have to give up a lot of movement to make them, and they cost nearly 50% more than a normal horseman to produce, it's ridiculously powerful. They have an aura that reduces enemy combat strength, they have a really high combat strength, and especially when you're using Chandragupta, the territorial war casus belly gives you Effectively speaking, 50 combat strength horsemen running around with 4 movement, knocking down cities in a turn or two, swarming across your enemy's border. That said, the penalties to the unit does bump them down a little bit, so I would go as far as to say that they're S tier when you're playing Chandragupta, and otherwise just B tier when you're playing as Gandhi. That's it for the classical era, another mixed bag of units of varying power levels, but I think the really interesting and unique playstyles offered by some of these units make this an exciting era for unique units. Next up will be the medieval era, starting with the Ottoman Barbary Corsair. Now this is a little bit of a sleeper unit. It's a privateer available much earlier than privateers, with a lower production and maintenance cost that can pillage without spending movement points. On paper, it's an incredible unit for cheaply doing harassment and economic damage to another empire. However, it kind of unfortunately relies on having a coastline and your opponents having things to pillage on their coastlines. And, you know, as the Ottomans, you kind of want to have a land army made of Janissaries and bombards to kill your opponents, and this kind of comes online just before that, so do you really want to spend production on it? Now, when you do combine it with the Raid card, the Great Lighthouse, and a Great Admiral, you basically have the equivalent of an anime supervillain teleporting behind people's coastal improvements, printing stupid amounts of golden faith for you. The only real drawback is that it kind of comes in the mid-game, and it's a naval unit with all their usual drawbacks. I'm going to go ahead and slot it into B tier, as it's a situationally very useful unit, but generally just kind of an okay unit. Oh man, the Norwegian Berzerker. Does it belong anywhere but S tier? Oh my god, this is like the greatest unit in the game. No, really, this thing shoots straight down to F tier. So let me try to explain why. It should be a good unit, but it's kind of just trash. It's supposed to be an offensive unit, but it's a melee class unit, which really suck at being offensive. On top of that, it's essentially a swordsman that becomes available at military tactics, which is a really awkward spot on the tech tree on higher difficulties, since by the time you research them, the AI will have crossbowmen or better, and this unit defends worse than a regular swordsman. It comes late, it's too squishy, and its bonuses don't really work to overcome that. So it's F tier. If they healed from all pillaging and pillaging took no movement, they would probably be a C tier unit quite easily. If they moved them to be a swordsman replacement unit, they would catapult all the way up to A or S tier, but unfortunately as it stands, I can't justify anything other than F. The Hungarian Black Army is essentially just a better Corsair that upgrades into the other Hungarian unique unit, the Hussar, which is also just a slightly better cavalry unit. It's a really solid unit that plays well with Hungary's bonuses for levying city-state units that can easily keep up with it and buff this unit to incredible heights. The only real downside for the unit is that it comes in the mid-game, and that said, it is a great mid-game conquest unit, and it probably would happily sit in A tier for me. And thanks to its high combat strength, its synergy with Hungary's bonuses, and the fact that it's a light cavalry unit, and cavalry are just fantastic units. Ooh, the Chinese Crouching Tiger. Oh my god, do I even need to tell you guys? Do I even need to tell you guys? It's an F tier unit. I'll often not even bother building this unit except for era score. There's a few incredibly niche situations where it will perform better than a crossbowman, like if you're in a mountain pass where very rough terrain with hills and forests. Otherwise, you're just wasting production. It's F tier. It's a crossbowman with 1 range. You build crossbowmen because they have 2 range. I don't even have a real idea of how to fix them. If they had an extra movement point, maybe they would jump up to C or D tier. If they had an extra range, they would jump all the way up to A, B, maybe even S tier. If they had a combination of those 2 things, they would instantly be S tier. It's just another one of those units that's hard to balance. A slight adjustment pushes it into being overpowered. Oh, this is actually one of my favorite units in the game, the Khmer Domrey. It's a brilliant unit. The Khmer don't have any specific bonuses, however, to make this unit better, but the Domrey don't really need them. It's pretty much just a slightly weaker bombard that's available much earlier that can move and shoot without the aid of great generals or promotions. Those things alone make it exceptionally useful moving into the mid-game, because you can start a conquest against a walled-up civ much earlier than other civs might be able to. The major problem with it are that it's a siege unit, so it comes with the downside of not having any ways to boost its production with civic cards, and that no units can upgrade into it, and the Khmer playstyle doesn't really leave a whole lot of extra room for production or science to get this thing online early. I'd give it a B tier rating. It's a good unit with considerable downsides, but one you should try and get value out of if you can, maybe taking a couple of your neighbours' cities, or something to that effect. So that's why, again, I'll slap it right into B tier. The Zulu Impi has some significant downsides worth considering. Firstly, it's a medieval era unit, so you'll need the second tier production card to produce them efficiently. It also becomes available at the military tactics tax. Both of these things combined mean you'll need a significant amount of science and culture to acquire them in a reasonable amount of time and to start taking advantage of them. However, the biggest downside is that it's an anti-cavalry unit, which are easily the second weakest category of units, only clocking in better than recon units. Despite these downsides, I still consider this an S tier unit for a number of reasons. First of all, they're nearly half the production cost of regular pikemen and have a negligible maintenance cost. They also have fantastic flanking bonuses and earn increased experience. More than that though, they combine incredibly well with the Zulu's other bonuses of unlocking corps and armies earlier, having stronger corps and armies, and automatically upgrading units into corps and armies when they conquer cities. All of these combine to make a unit that will swarm over the landscape and get stronger as they fight, faster than any unit in the game. If the Zulu get to Impi in a reasonable time frame, it's safe to say the game is over for their neighbours if they aren't significantly ahead of the Zulu, and the snowball effect of killing a neighbour can easily carry the Zulu into a full domination game where there are no breaks. The Indonesian Jong is a reasonably interesting unit, mainly because you unlock it from the civic tree and not the tech tree. It's basically a frigate that doesn't cost strategic resources that's unlocked at mercenaries. The real power of the unit isn't overwhelming force or anything like that, but mostly that you can use the Indonesian faith purchasing ability to buy Jongs right as you unlock them to do some very early conquest of coastal cities. An even more interesting strategy is to faith buy quadriremes, which are much cheaper, and then when you unlock the Jong, use the professional army card to upgrade those quadriremes to Jongs and have an army twice the size or bigger, all depending on how much faith and gold you had. Its actual bonuses themselves aren't super interesting, but the unit is good enough and the strategies it enables strong enough to put it into B tier alongside the Barbary Corsair. The Mongolian Keshig is a fantastic unit that I've been trying to debate between putting it on A or S tier. It's a high movement speed crossbowman that you unlock with knights, making it the perfect support army for an army of knights, which is what you're going to want to have as Mongolian, considering all of their bonuses to cavalry. Those benefits are, extra combat strength, extra movement speed, the ability to capture enemy horse units. The thing that really pushed it over the edge to S tier for me though, is that it counts as a ranged cavalry unit, which means that it benefits from the feudal contract policy card. When you're doing a night rush normally, chivalry is kind of in an awkward place on the tech tree for a domination game, all the way down by monarchy in the civic tree. So being able to build stronger, higher movement crossbowmen earlier with less tech and civic investment is really valuable. But it also just upgrades into field cannons, which is enough to drop it back down to A tier for me. Field cannons are arguably the least useful, sorry, not the least useful, the last useful ranged class unit in the game, in my opinion. And they very quickly stop being useful once they're available. Keshig do have a window of time where they reign supreme, but they tend to fall off quickly, and so I can't really justify anything higher than an A tier. It's a fantastic unit, it just has a couple of things holding it back from being truly S tier. Oh, okay, this is a unit that I'm really not looking forward to rating. The Georgian Khevsur is basically like every unit that's locked behind military tactics, excluding the Impi, it's just bad. It's slow movement, it's slow to unlock technologically, its bonuses aren't exceptionally useful, when the iron and production you put into these guys would get a lot more mileage being put into knights or earlier in the game swordsmen. If this was a swordsman replacement unit with stat scale to match, it would be at least a B or A tier. It's just awkward to use and it comes late, so it has to go into E tier. The only real way to fix this unit and the other military tactics unique units is to make military tactics go all the way down to the bottom half of the tech tree. Make it a prerequisite of stirrups, castles, or military engineering, so it's not completely out of the normal tech path for a land domination game. No amount of buffing or changing these units, with the exception of the Impi because that thing is just ridiculous, will ever fix the fundamental problem that's holding back these units. And to an extent, a lot of those problems apply to the Impi and probably should justify it getting a lower rating than S, but I like that unit so much that I'm going to kind of like give it a little kind of a bump up there. Once upon a time, the Arabian Mamluk was the premier medieval era unique unit. However, thanks to extensive changes to the tech tree, strategic resources, and other game mechanics, the unit really isn't what it used to be. By no means is it a bad unit. It's just a knight that heals every turn and costs less strategic resources. It's still a knight, which is a really good unit, and the sustain from their automatic healing is really useful, since you can use them to pillage and still heal, so they're a solid D tier unit based on that alone. However, knights are just kind of like so good that I almost feel bad not leaving them at C tier, right? Like, this is just like a really damn good unit purely because it's a knight that heals every turn. I could honestly see myself putting them into B tier based on that alone. The Malian Mandakalu Cavalry is another knight replacement unit like the Mamluk, but it has some advantages over the Mamluk and none of its downsides. It has a very small increase in combat strength, and the ability to earn gold from kills makes it just a very slightly better knight. However, Mali is kind of really bad at building units, and that precious gold you would be spending on this would be better spent on getting more economy instead of making this. It's not that you can't do a Night Rush as Mali, and you will get some extra value if you do. It's just that this unit doesn't have anything to stand out to make it significantly better than a Knight, which should tell you a lot how powerful a Knight is considering it's going to get a C tier. I've been sitting here hemming and hawing for a while, and I think both of these units belong at C tier, now that I've really thought about it. Like, the Knight is just kind of good, but man, maybe they belong at B tier just because the Knights are really damn good. So I'll pop them into B tier for now. And look, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record when I talk about units that are unlocked by military tactics. The Japanese Samurai is no different. Thankfully, it is the last unit that I'm going to have to say that about. It has all of the same problems of the Khevsur, the Impi, and the Berzerker, except this unit just really has nothing else going for it to offset those downsides. It has like a meager combat bonus in that it doesn't take, combat penalties when it's wounded, and it has like a little bit of a coastal attack bonus from Japan. It just really isn't worth building this unless you're doing it for era score. Again, the same way to fix this is the same for fixing any of these guys. I'm just gonna go ahead and pop it down into F tier. Well, I'll give it an E tier because no, it's got to be F tier. It's No, E tier. It is slightly better than the Berzerker. I will give it that. That is its one saving grace. It is slightly better than the Berzerker, and so it doesn't belong on F tier. The real thing I want to say about the Samurai is that it's a unit that's really showing its age in terms of the game's design. I think there's a lot of these like little weird areas of the game that need to be corrected. Like units that can't be upgraded into, units that don't upgrade into appropriate units. Units that are on weird places in the tech tree. There's a lot of these like little game design things that have been around since launch that haven't been appropriately addressed in my opinion. Now the Warakaq from the Inca is a unit that I don't have a lot of experience with, so I don't feel super confident giving it like a firm rating. Mainly because my playstyle as the Inca completely ignores this unit. Recon units are just like not great in my opinion, and I don't typically go down the Warakaq line of the tech tree early enough to make it useful. By the time I unlock this unit, it's kind of obsolete. And then you add to the fact, again, that it's a recon unit, there's no cards that boost its production, and it's really hard to get the ambush promotion. However, that said, this is a unit that can get the ambush promotion thanks to its, double shot and stuff like that. So I can see if you got that ambush promotion, it would be a really damn good unit. I'll give it like a tentative safe C tier rating, but this isn't a rating that I feel super confident about. It's definitely a unit that I want to experiment with. I just don't think it's a replacement for the crossbowman, mainly because of its low range and weak defensive strength. But it could have a place in an army if you were doing a very particular style of play. Now, much like the Jong, the Polish Winged Hussar is a really interesting unit because it's unlocked at the civic tree instead of the tech tree. However, there are some substantial differences between the Hussar and the Jong that hold the Hussar back. First of all, you can't upgrade into the Winged Hussar and you have to like hard build it. And the civic card to produce their production is on the opposite side of the civic tree, which means you're going to be paying full price when you're building this unit. However, this is a unit that's only 30 production more expensive than a knight and has an extra 7 combat strength. So that alone means they're worth building since they're acquired at roughly the same number of turns into a game on average. Being able to push enemy units around on the battlefield, especially off of defensive terrain, to enable other units to attack them and destroy them, as well as units who can't be pushed taking more damage, makes the Winged Hussar a really decently strong unit. It has some downsides and it has a couple of things working against it, but it's strong enough for me to pop it up into A tier. Especially if you're using the Polish encampment culture bomb and the crusade belief, this can become a really ridiculously powerful unit. Swinging on over to the Renaissance era, you're going to start seeing a recurring theme from here on out. These units come a bit too late into the game to be useful, and in all honesty, some of the problems apply to the units that come in the medieval era as well, but the Renaissance is where a bunch of things have solidified in terms of the game's trajectory, and these units either become ways for you to win more, or as really bad investments that aren't going to catch you back up if you're losing. Rarely do I find myself in a position around the Renaissance where I'm fairly equal with someone and could use the power of a unique unit to overtake them, and it's often just something that I do because I'm already winning or because I need era score. The Swedish Karolian is a good replacement for the pike and shot. The only problem is that the pike and shot is a garbage unit. It's easily outclassed by every unit that you've already got unlocked by the time that you can build it, or will shortly be outclassed by units that you'll research immediately after this unit. It's just an unwise decision to invest into Karolians. Never mind pike and shots. It does have good stats, and if you had a couple of spearmen hanging around from earlier eras and you have some good promotions on them, they can form a formidable part of your army. Their bonuses are good, but it's not a unit that I would generally recommend aside from just getting era score, or if you have like literally no strategic resources. I mean, you can make them work, don't get me wrong. With a great general and a lot of promotions, they can be really, really powerful. But really, I don't see anything higher than a D tier. They're just kind of weak through no fault of their own. The Spanish Conquistador is an all-around decent unit with little to no downsides. If you're in a situation where you are going to want to make musketmen, you'll simply be better off than other civs. I do find myself only rarely using musketmen, preferring to save precious niter for more important units like the bombard or the frigate, but their extra combat strength from having a religious unit on their tile makes them pretty damn strong, even if you have to invest some faith into making them reach their peak power level. I'm not sure that converting cities when you conquer them is really a useful ability. I mean, I guess it would save you like a little bit of faith on Inquisitors, but I guess it is kind of a bonus, I guess. Throw in the fact that Spain has a little bit of extra combat strength against other civs following different religions, and this is a pretty decent unit. So I'll pop it into C tier as a unit that's like pretty okay, but not something that I would like heavily base my entire game plan around. Although if you were to like do that and make them like the sole focus of your game plan, they could probably be like A or B tier. The Dutch De Zeven Provinciën is a strong navy unit in my opinion. It suffers the normal downsides of being a naval unit, however it's a stronger replacement of the arguably strongest naval unit in the game, the frigate. That alone will work well in its favour, especially when you consider that it has a higher base combat strength by 5 all around, as well as a bonus to attacking districts, and it only costs 10 niter to build. That's why I'm going to give it a B tier rating. It's a solid unit. It's not amazing, but absolutely worth using in situations where you may have considered using frigates. The Korean Hwacha is a unit that I have little to no experience with and a bit of a love-hate relationship with. In theory, it's a great unit because it gives you the power of a field cannon an era earlier. And in combination with Korea's lightning speed tech research, it can be an amazing unit to rush your opponents with. Problem is, when I'm playing Korea, I'm going for a science victory, and I'll be struggling to keep up with all the infrastructure buildings that I'm unlocking, so I never really have time to use this unit against another player. That's why I'm going to have a hard time giving a genuine opinion on it. So I'll probably just plop it down into C tier, considering I would probably just rather wait for bombards a few turns after I unlock this. Let's take a moment to talk about the Ottoman Janissary. My goodness, this unit is strong enough to warrant not only going to war with it, but going to war 2 eras earlier with swordsmen and catapults, just so you can have Janissaries with promotions. Since as the Ottomans, you're going to want to have units with high promotions in the melee and siege category class of units, and the Ottomans have really good bonuses to both of those things. What you want to do is use the melee units as like a giant shield to just hold the line while your siege units just batter down your enemy's cities. The important thing to note here is that swordsmen can upgrade into janissaries, and thanks to their low cost, the upgrade is incredibly cheap, especially if you use the civic cards that make it even cheaper. The only real thing holding them back is that they take Niter, and Niter is like a very critical resource for the Ottomans because their two most important units, the Janissary and the Bombard, both use Niter, and of those two, the Bombard is the more important unit. I would say this unit is absolutely worth making in your games because it's a half-price musketman with some extra stuff on top. It's absolutely, in fact, I would go as far as to say if this unit is absolutely worth basing your entire game plan around attacking when you have janissaries with catapults to back them up, which will then get upgraded into bombards. For that reason, I'm going to pop them into A tier. They are a half-price musketman that you can get a stupid amount of incredibly quickly. Now, the Mapuche Malon Raider is a genuine terror. Because it is the one exception to the rule that I talked about at the start of this era, where unique units don't help you when you're already losing. If you're next to someone running away with the game and they hit a golden age when you're popping these boys out, you essentially have 30 to 40 turns to completely wreak havoc upon them with little to no chance of retaliation. You can pillage everything, you can kill their units, you can capture their civilians. These guys can have up to 65 to 70 combat strength against civs in a golden age, and they're unlocked at the same time as musketmen. Now they are expensive to build and maintain, but they're game breaking in very specific circumstances. Otherwise, they are just solid units that would sit at B tier. However, thanks to their other bonuses on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and pop them up into A tier. Now, I'll probably get some flack for the amount of shit talking I'm about to do with regards to the English Sea Dog, but this unit quite simply isn't very good. Capturing naval units is a pretty weak bonus for the privateer, which is a class of units I would much rather just have frigates instead, if I could. The reason the Barbary Corsair and so on are so good are because they bring kind of some meaningful bonus to the table, which the Sea Dog just really doesn't. The privateer is a generally bad unit, and a unique unit that changes nothing about the problems with the privateer is by extension bad. It's a bad unit whose only saving grace is that it's unlocked on the culture tree, so if you have a strong culture game, you might be able to run around and steal people's ships for fun, but I'd rather just invest in more culture. That's why it's going all the way down to E tier. It's not the worst unit in the game, but it's just not very good. Even if I do wish I could put every English thing on these tier lists into F tier all on their own just for the meme, it's not the worst unit in the game. It's just not very good. If I were going to fix this unit, I would make it get double value from coastal pillaging, make it a little bit cheaper to build, and maybe a small buff to its combat strength. And then it would like be, you know, a pretty decent C, B tier unit. That's it for the Renaissance unique units. Let's pop over to the industrial units. And a big theme with these is that they need to bring some serious bonuses to be useful, because by the time these units come out, the game is nearing completion, or at least further than halfway along. We'll start off with the Russian Cossack, which is a brilliant unit thanks to its ability to move after attacking. That might seem like a small thing, but it means groups of them can focus fire on a single unit, eliminating them turn after turn, because one of them can attack and then move out of the way. So even choke points aren't really a blocker for the Russian Cossack if you have a nice road. The other thing is that they have a higher combat strength and they have bonuses for fighting in Russian territory, so it's a pretty damn formidable cavalry unit in the right hands. For that reason, I'm going to go ahead and pop it right into B tier. It's a really solid unit that can do a lot of work, and cavalry are really good in the first place. The only thing holding them back is how late into the game that they appear. Oh man, the French Imperial Guard, it's just quite simple. It's a mediocre unit. You have to hard build them, they unlock late into the game, and you can't upgrade into them. It's not terrible, it's just not amazing. It's really good when used on your own continent to take over that continent, but it's a slow melee class unit with a high combat strength. I'd rather have cavalry and artillery in most cases. That's why I'm going to go ahead and just pop it into C tier. It's not a bad unit, it's just simply middle of the road. If they were a true replacement for the musketmen and could be upgraded into from swordsmen with a smaller base combat strength, they would jump a tier or two. But this is again just another one of those like original sort of release units that hasn't been really updated in terms of the game's design. And really it's just game mechanics are a little bit outdated, like the samurai and the redcoat. The Scottish Highlander is unfortunately a recon unit, and while they have great promotions and great combat stats, most other units that are available when it's unlocked simply perform better. There's no cards to make them faster to produce, and they're only moderately better than the unit that they replace. And for those reasons, I can't justify putting them higher than D tier. It's just, you know, the base unit just isn't very good, and a slightly better base unit doesn't make a good unit. Now that said, they can be very good, but it's just a lot of effort to get value from them when you could do so much less work and get so much more value from other units. The Hungarian Hussar is a very strong unit for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a light cavalry unit with a high movement speed and combat strength. It can be upgraded from the Black Army, which is an A tier unit, and that's a really nice thing. If you like, it's an incredibly unique thing that Hungary can do, which is upgrade one of their unique units into another unique unit, which means they go from having one strong version of an already strong base unit into having another strong version of the next tier of that strong base unit. That said, as good as it is, this unit isn't really a game changer the way that the Black Army can be, so I'm going to go ahead and pop it into B tier. It has some nice bonuses, but they're not the kind of bonuses that would say, oh my god, I need this unit. It's more like, I want to get Black Armies, and so I'm going to follow that up with Hussars, and Hussars are just good as a result. Now, the Grand Colombian Llanero is kind of straight up busted. However, the Civ is so strong on its own that by the time you unlock them, the game is more or less already over. Their ability to be aggressive early into the game often means that it's simply a win more unit that helps close out a game you were already steamrolling. I'll pop them into S tier just because of how like crazy the combat strength they can get is, but it's a little bit unnecessary really to actually use the Llanero. The Brazilian Minas Gerais, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's going to be the only naval unit on this list that goes up to S tier or even A tier. And that's because it's a battleship unit with higher combat strength that you can have on the board when most other people have frigates, thanks to it being unlocked at nationalism in the culture tree as opposed to steel on the tech tree. It can single-handedly win you the game on a water map quite easily by ripping apart enemy coastal cities. The only downside is that it's quite expensive, but you'll definitely get a return on investment in situations where you would want to build this unit. And it also requires coal, which is like a little bit of a tough thing to always justify coal as a thing, because maybe you want coal power plants and stuff like that. But other than that, it's an S tier unit just by the fact that it's available so early and it's so incredibly powerful. The English Redcoat is a fantastically powerful unit in a very select set of circumstances, namely when you get them for free by settling or building Royal Navy dockyards as Victoria. If you have to hard build them, much like the French Garde Impériale, they tend to be really underwhelming. But throw a couple of them into your army for free and you'll have a solid accompaniment to any army, especially on other continents. That's why I'll slot them into C tier with the Garde Impériale. Well, no, they are slightly better than the Garde Impériale because you can get them for free, so I'll pop them up into B tier. The American Rough Rider is a lot like the Russian Cossack. It's decently powerful, but it does have two major drawbacks. It can't be upgraded into, and it skips the tank upgrade, going straight to modern armor. This is another one of these units that has just like a really outdated design and needs like a little rework and reintegration with the new design philosophy of the game. Because honestly, these drawbacks hold back what should be a really powerful game-defining unit. So I'm just going to have to slot them into C tier. They're like a good unit, but they're just really awkward to use. Like, you add to the fact that they come super late in the game, despite the fact that they're really powerful and they're really, really expensive, you've got a recipe for a unit that's like good but not amazing. That's it for the industrial era, and there's not much to be said about the upcoming units other than they come really late and aren't very good for actual combat, with the exception of the P-51 Mustang. Oh, the Australian Digger is kind of trash, unfortunately. There's no reason to make melee units at the point in the game where you unlock it, since they're outclassed by all other options and they don't offer any significant combat bonuses to make me want to build them. However, they don't require oil, and they do have a decent combat strength, so that makes them strong enough for me to want to put them on C tier, despite the fact that they kind of really should live on the bottom half of this tier list. The Canadian Mountie is another unit that instantly skyrockets all the way to S tier, because they're a way to convert production and gold into effective faith. This is like an incredibly powerful ability that will massively speed up how quickly you win a culture victory and allow you to put more faith into rock bands, thus speeding up your culture victory even more. It's really a game-changing unit, but it's pretty mediocre as a combat unit. The German U-boat just isn't very good by the virtue of the fact that submarines aren't very good. Not really much else to say. You'll get a slight bit of extra value when you're using submarines, but those situations are so scarce that I can't justify anything other than, I would say, maybe like a D tier? No. Maybe E tier? I guess the U-boat is slightly better than the Sea Dog, even if it does come later into the game, so I'll pop it into D tier. That's it for the modern era. We'll move swiftly on to the last remaining unique unit from the Atomic era, the P-51 Mustang from America. Bucks the trend for later era unique units being not overly useful due to the fact that it's an airplane. Airplanes are incredibly useful in late game combat, and fighters essentially take over the role of ranged combat units, and bombers take over the role of siege units. It's an all-around just damn good unit by virtue of the fact that fighters are good units. It has some nice bonuses, but nothing overwhelming, so I can't really justify higher than a B tier. It's good, but not amazing. That's it for my tier list. Hope you guys enjoyed it. This one took a lot longer to make due to the sheer amount of research required and the number of unique units in the game. I really hope you guys consider subscribing, liking the video, joining as a member of the channel. I love you all very, very much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.